Hey, it's Bill Gross, and this is my weekly real estate market review. As I prepared this week's podcast, I was shocked about how almost every news story, on one hand, we're being told one thing, and on the other hand, it's obvious that's not the case. We're being told that the war on homelessness is being beaten. And in reality, I see more homelessness all the time here in Los Angeles. We're told that crime is going down, but in reality, we know there's more crime and robberies than I've ever experienced living in Los Angeles for 25 years. And so on and so forth. And so I noticed this pattern. I want to share that with you guys today. But before we get into details, let's make sure we review where the economy is. And that's always with statistics. So rather than me just pontificating, we're going to go where the numbers are to understand. Now, in any economy, there's supply and demand. And supply is the amount of inventory. Demand is probably measured or most affected by interest rates in the mortgage industry. And this week we had a volatile ride. We actually had mortgage rates jump up above 7.5% briefly, and then jump back down and close the week at 7.22. So we ended the week down below almost 0.25%, which will always stimulate more demand. And I have to tell you, I've never had so many homes that were pending escrow, meaning getting ready to close, where I got offers and inquiries that I have in the last 6 months or so. So I know the demand is still out there for houses. As long as rates stay in the range of where they've been over the last year or two, I'd imagine that will continue. I don't know if it will continue. It feels very tight, very volatile, ready to break up or down. I don't know which way. It certainly seems very stressed. On the supply side, you'll notice that now this year is starting to create a pattern where the inventory is about 10% higher than last year. Now, last year was the lowest record ever for a non-pandemic year. You'll notice the only years below it were pandemic era. Like a lot of businesses, we're starting to adjust back to normal. But even still, we have about another 50,000 homes nationwide, about 10% more homes for sale. Not a lot, not enough to change the economics, but certainly it's more, and it's certainly a little less pressure on the selling side. Now, real estate inherently is a very local economy, and so we want to make sure we look at each area being different. And in Los Angeles, our market overall, using Altos Research, which is a great source, we're still about a 42, which means we're a slight seller's market. Still, we've remained that consistently for the last few years. More of a slight seller's market the last year or so, been in this range. And so we're at a 42. And overall, prices seem to be about steady, inventory steady. Things are kind of hanging in about where they are. So overall, we know that we have a fairly consistent market with what we've been experiencing over the last year and a half or so. No major changes on the horizon. Okay, under news, under the is it me or you, we're told that crime's not that bad. The truth is, we know that many police departments are not reporting their data to the FBI as required. And this is a designed method to kind of understate the effect of real crime. But in the news last week was our mayor in Los Angeles, Mayor Bass, who's telling us that crime is getting better and she's beating crime. Her house was broken into. Now, it's not her fault that her house was broken into, but it certainly does. It is ironic that while she's campaigning around the city saying crime's not that bad and we're making great progress, that literally her own home is broken into. I just find that to be incredibly ironic. And the more that I think the emperor tells us that everything's better, we see that the emperor is wearing no clothes. One of the interesting news items last week was the Los Angeles Dodgers applying for a permit for renovations at Dodger Stadium. You know, we all, I guess, live by some of the same rules, at least. One of the most prominent residents in Los Angeles is the Dodgers, and one of the most iconic buildings is Dodger Stadium. And they posted online their permit request to, I think, redo mostly below the field, expanding clubhouses and facilities underground. And it's just, I found it interesting. I linked it in my email version of this podcast if you're interested. But I just found it fascinating that even something that goes on, I never really thought about it, but even a major stadium has to put out a permit process and send it to the city of Los Angeles. Imagine some clerk who gets the mail and opens it up, or email, or however that gets done. And so that goes on even for iconic team like the Los Angeles Dodgers. Also, the news under, I guess you would say bad news, but I guess it's better to at least admit the bad news than be surprised. There was a study that showed that the quality of life, the satisfaction of residents has declined again and is at a 9-year low in Los Angeles. And what's interesting is the major issue Los Angeles have is economic. It's not crime. It's not what could be a lot of other things. It really is just that everything costs so much. And that's what's driving people to move somewhere else. So, and again, I'm not a big fan of UCLA. If you know me, I think we should make the whole thing into condos or affordable housing. But there you are, the 9-year low and declining. And I think that explains one reason why so many Los Angelinos are moving to other states. One of the factors that makes it harder for people to buy houses overall, as talked about a lot, is student loans. And it's interesting, Chase is a company that you would think as a bank, their responsibility would be to help taxpayers. You know, they take taxpayer money to exist and use it and use the benefits of it. And you would think somewhere along the line they'd be required to do something that helps American citizens. They don't. But it was interesting that Jamie Dimon, their chairman, and really one of the real forces of evil, I'm actually writing an entire podcast on my Real Estate Ripoffs podcast about him. But he said the quiet part out loud that nobody really wants to say, which is it doesn't really matter what you study when you're in college. Now, obviously, there's exceptions, medicine and sciences and things. But he's talking about in general for business practices. And what that is a condemnation of the education in our college system, right? People spend 4 years and $100,000 or more to get an education. He's saying it doesn't matter what you study. It also, I guess, would mean it doesn't matter where you study. And the question that I like to ask him, does it matter that you study at all in college, or might you be better off? My assessment for most people in non-technical skills, not doctors, not engineers, but most people in general business, they'd be way better off spending 4 years in a real business, learning the business. At the end of 4 years, they have experience, knowledge of an industry in depth. And they learn more, I believe, actually doing the work than they do in college, working on spreadsheets and such. So it's just interesting of all people that Jamie Dimon would say that part out loud, since he's such a part of the political class that has, I think, encouraged people to take on massive debt. I also found interesting when I looked into the details, how college debt has been declining so much. It peaked in 2010-11 at $152 billion and is now down to 98 billion. So it's come down about 30-40%, the total amount lent. Most every other business has gone up nonstop in that time period or stayed flat. And so it does tell you that there were abuses of the system and they've been reeled in. And it does, I think, indicate some point to students who feel they've been taken advantage of, where loans were given out frivolously. I mean, here you have the chairman of JP Morgan saying it doesn't matter where you study. Then, obviously somebody who spent a lot of money to get an Ivy League education in some sort of unimpactful department would have grounds for being frustrated or upset. I don't know that I would justify for giving the money. If you agree to take it, you should be responsible for it. I don't think that sends the right message at all. But it is fascinating that our political class is really backing away from the importance of college, and saying that out loud, I think, is a very interesting study. On another front, one of the things I love as a Californian is when other states act as stupid as we do. And the latest to the party now is Colorado. Colorado is passing a law that basically steals property from homeowners, from landlords, people want to rent property out, and give it to tenants who otherwise wouldn't be entitled. And the way they do this is owners of property who might have saved their whole life to buy an investment or use a real property for their retirement or their way of life, now can't just terminate a tenant contract, even though the tenant agreed to only live there for a certain period of time on a lease or month to month, but now it has to show cause. And of course, once you have to show cause, you have to go to a judge. And this is where progressive states have judges that will make it harder and harder and harder to show realistic cause. And now you have the state saying, well, that is just cause, but that's not. And so this is just another land grab. And Colorado adds to the states and cities that are destroying personal property, which are the foundations of our American success story, the American dream. And it doesn't work out for those areas. You look at the areas that have taken property and given it to tenants, and inevitably you have less homes built, you have less renovation, you have less housing overall, lower quality housing, lower income, and lower investments. And so Colorado, welcome to the party, but I assure you, it doesn't end well. The end of the story is not a good one for them. Next, to lead the way in idiocy, as Los Angeles has to always, our city added a new department because we don't have enough government employees taking tax dollars. So we have now the LA City Council creates a new department called the Department of Homelessness. Now, one of the things you should know is that anytime a government entity creates a new department, two things happen. One, that problem never gets solved, it just grows. And two, the department never goes away. And so, we've had our Governor Newsom, over 10 years ago, promised to eliminate homelessness. We've had a city mayor elected who promised to eliminate homelessness. We have, millions, if not billions of dollars now added to try to solve this homeless problem. And now we have a new department. We're going to hire new people whose sole purpose in life is make sure they have a job. And the way they do that is by feeding the homeless industry. Last week, I talked about the whole industry that's popped up around this business of homelessness by governments. So that's not going to end well either. That's just going to be a nonstop boondoggle here in the city of Los Angeles. Next, there's a lot in the news a few months ago about President Trump's valuation of properties and how he overstated his value of property, or he didn't overstate it. Just to show how volatile values of properties are, I thought I would share, this is a fascinating story. Blackstone, one of the largest entities in America, they have a property they bought in 2014 for $605 million, this massive building, trophy building. They sold it last week for $185 million. They lost over $400 million on that property. And it just shows you how hard it is to value, how property values are volatile. It shows you how office space, even in places like Manhattan, is plummeting. And it's going to affect banks across the country. So it is a warning sign for our economy. But I think more importantly, it also shows how valuations are so subjective between a buyer, a seller, an appraiser, a tax assessor, insurance company, a lender. There's many different opinions, but at the end of the day, the one that matters was when a buyer and a seller agree there's a transaction. As long as it's a at arm's length transaction, that's the best indicator of value. And to try to come up with interim values is at best an art, not a science, and it's very difficult. And I think the people who lambasted former President Trump over the valuation clearly didn't know what they're talking about. Next, speaking of banks acting poorly and taxpayers on the hook, here's another news story on that subject, which is JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citibank have $7.4 trillion. If you look at the numbers, I had to look at those zeros a few times to verify. In off-balance sheet and potentially dangerous cocktail of unknown assets. Now, this is what led to the 2008 downfall, which was the banks who are basically, if you think of the banks as Las Vegas gamblers who are betting money from the taxpayers, and if they win, they put the winnings in their pocket, and then when they're busted out, they turn to us and ask for more. That's what they did in 2008. So JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citibank are basically playing with taxpayer money and have $7.4 trillion in assets that they're not really disclosing to regulators and updating the values regularly, and are considered dangerous assets. But they're still allowed to grow, and because of their domination in the market, replace local commercial banks that Americans need for businesses. And I say this as a local businessman. We really need more local banks. I have a business I'm working with right now where we have a hard time finding a local bank to work with us. We found one to do some of the work, but not the others. And they're just not that aggressive because they don't have to be, because they have more business than they need as more and more banks are going out of business. Speaking of bad bankers and the person in charge, one of them being Janet Yellen, if you want to know why our economy is so out of control, It's because our leadership is probably so stupid. Here's case in point Janet Yellen, who says that she despairs that housing market's 1-2 punch for first-time homebuyers. She refers to that as inflation and higher rates. Well, she's the person who's supposed to be the backstop. She was the government official who, when the government was proposing to spend trillions of dollars, said, oh no, inflation will be transitory. Now, when she said that, she sounded like a grandmother who didn't even know what the word meant, but she repeated it into the TV screen over and over again. And here we are years later, we realize that what she said was wrong. Either she's incompetent or dishonest. You can take your pick. But we know that the money we spent, trillions of dollars, are still affecting our inflation rate. And that's the 1-2 punch. Inflation rate, cost of living, hard to save money, and inflation causes rates to go up, harder for buyers to qualify for mortgages. So here this lady acts like she doesn't know what's going on. If you take her at her word, she's just incompetent and stupid. If you want to take the worst side of it, she probably is worse than that and probably knows what she's doing. And what's interesting is she lives on a very modest government salary of about $250,000 a year, but she gets paid about $7 million a year by banks and big companies that she's supposed to be regulating. So that's the par for the course in Washington, is that people are supposed to be protecting taxpayer dollars, are too busy lining their pockets with special interest money, and then they're wow, how did inflation happen? Janet Yellen, she doesn't know. She really doesn't know what she says. These people are just beyond the pale. Speaking of which, our federal government's broadcast medium source, NPR, National Public Radio, which also has TV and websites, says housing experts say there just aren't enough homes in the U.S. Like, that's a news story to our federal government. There aren't enough homes. Now, we know that there's not enough inventory if you're in real estate. We know there's homeless people, which means people with no homes. We know there's hardly any homes available for rent. There's hardly any available homes for sale. I mean, you don't need a math wizard to figure out we don't have enough homes. And here's your federal government saying, housing experts say there just aren't enough homes in the U.S. I've been saying this in my podcast for years. And so now what's happening is they're saying it out loud as though they didn't notice it all along. I don't even know what to make of this one. I don't know. The whole thing, our government is just, I think, playing us for stupid, or they're just really that stupid. Speaking of dishonest, MarketWatch, never one to miss a chance to mislead their readers. Had an article this week. Rents have finally stopped skyrocketing, which is true. Rents went up a lot during COVID, immediately post-COVID. But the next part is they're now stuck at a price most Americans can afford. Now, there's virtually no vacancies in America. Maybe in some markets there's 5%, 10%. But virtually by historical standards, there's hardly any vacancies in rental property. There's hardly any homes for sale. But MarketWatch wants you to believe most Americans can't afford the rental costs. Of course they can. They're living in houses. I mean, sometimes I read these things and wonder, what's the point of an article like that? Is it just to confuse people? Is that really their job? You would think if they're in the news, the goal would be to educate or provide valuable information. But they've obviously stopped doing that. Here's a question. And again, this is the government telling you something which is obviously not true. You know, homelessness. It's hard to get homes and low-income homes. What if you found somebody who needed a home and you're just going to write them a check and say, look, you're homeless. Boom, here's a house you can afford to live in. How much do you think that would be? You know, most people would say $300,000. You can live in a modest condo, $400,000. You can live in some cheaper condos in the city of Los Angeles. You can certainly move into suburban areas and get a decent, condo in a nice place. I've sold such condos recently. You could buy a house in South LA for $500, $550, fix it up. There are homes for sale in those prices. The city of Santa Monica is giving to homeless people condos that cost, I'm surprised. Are you surprised? $1 million each. They're gonna build the 122 studio 1 and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom apartments. There'll be some retail, but at the end of the day, for $123 million, there'll only be 122 units. So it's about $1 million a unit. That sounds like a lot. We're just gonna give people a unit worth $1 million. I don't know. What do you think? I I don't know what to say. I just don't even know what to say. We're gonna give people who are homeless. I imagine that means people come here from all around the world, right? Because we don't distinguish between people who are here illegally and people who are legally. We're just gonna give them $1 million condo in Santa Monica to 122 people, and then when that's done, we're gonna build another 122, another couple thousand. I know Beverly Hills is supposed to build another 2,400 low-income homes here in Beverly Hills. So is that what we're doing? I don't know. It seems like a lot to me. I love your feedback. Put it in the comments down below. Is $1 million enough? Maybe we should buy them at $2 million. Maybe we should make sure they have an ocean view. Maybe we should, I don't know, have concierge services or what? Do you, what? I don't know. What do you think? Tell me. Personally, I think the whole thing's out of control, and we have to hold the political leadership accountable. It's not enough just to complain about it. That's why I've personally, and I think it's some risk to my business. I'm going online and endorsing the recall, the second recall of Governor Newsom. You can download and fill out yourself and at least be heard that you disapprove. I don't know if it'll be successful or not, but I do think it sends a loud statement that we're holding him responsible. He's the person who I think turned San Francisco what it is, and now our state, both when he was lieutenant governor and governor, and he's really pushed a lot of these policies that have made housing less affordable and made our economy less attractive. And as a result, we have people moving out, not moving in, who are here legally. So that's what I think. What do you think? I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media. I love your comments. Reply, respond, put it in the chat box. Give me a call, text me. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.